so far, and we are continuing in the next part, and we will talk about the outdoor air quality and various other interesting topics, and each presentation will bring something very interesting, and I'm very curious where it's going to link. And now let me welcome the next speaker. And just to remind, please join our raffle and to get nice benefits. And you never know, you can always win. You have already smiled, you've already agreed with someone. And yeah, all right, then we will sit in the same car the same weekend. Now, let's move on to ladies. I hope that they are present, and we will talk about the outdoor air quality as a key to healthy and resilient cities. We have Sandra Androvichova instead of Alena Popovichova and Dominika Kamasova. And you two will be switching, taking turns. You are environmental engineers from Arpenviro. And what will be the main topic? Will it be the cleanness of the air? Yes, and also what consequences come when we neglect this outdoor air quality, and we focus on self-governing authorities, and they will get to know what kind of consequences there can be and how these issues can be solved. So it's a little bit broader topic, so it's not just about me breathing clean air and having enough air. So when I'm snoring at night, it would be enough to seal my lips. Anyway, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for your welcome. Maybe I will disappoint you for a little bit, but we will talk a bit negatively at the beginning. I hope you will stay with us. Every day we measure various things and various indicators in detail, and we are also evaluating them in details, and this attribute gets lost when we come to one topic that is also indicated by the presentation name, which is the outdoor air quality, because we breathe this air every day, and it can have negative impacts on our everyday life. The outdoor air pollution is caused by various pollutants. We don't have space to go into all of them in detail, but I would show you a couple of categories that are usually dealt with from the perspective of legislation as well. The first category are solid pollutants, which are created by fuel combustion and also solid fuel combustion, but also they are arising from industrial activity. This PM2.5 are so small they can penetrate our blood, and they can cause various inflammatory processes that can lead to various illnesses, such as cardiovascular illnesses. The next category are nitrogen oxides, specifically NO2, that arises or that is formed as a consequence of transportation, but also by fuel combustion. It's a group of pollutant which limit is usually overcome. We also have the photochemical reaction of ozone. We will talk about it later. I would also mention that this ozone has negative consequences, not only on people, but also on vegetation, because it damages it. Then we have a group of pollutants like sulfur oxides. They are created through evaporation, and they originate in industry, and they contribute to acid rain falls that negatively impact the vegetation as well as people. Another neglected group are biogenic volatile organic compounds that come from landfills, industry, or agriculture. And some substances belonging to this group may be carcinogenic. They can also contribute to the creation of ground level ozone. We also have carbon monoxide. It's called a silent killer because it binds to hemoglobin, and it can also cause the suffocation. It doesn't happen very often in regular environment. We don't need to, when it comes to regular environment, we don't need to talk about it, but it still has a negative impact on our respiratory system. It leads to various coughing, seizures, and so on. And the last group that I will talk about are polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, which are created through the solid fuel combustion. And they are very toxic and carcinogenic, and the problem of these substances are that they bind on the small dust particles, and as such they get deeply into our lungs. That can have negative consequences, and except for that, or besides that, they are transported or transferred by wind, so they don't end up only in our lungs but also in the whole ecosystem and food chain. All these impacts are scientifically proven, and there are plenty of studies that are explaining these dynamics. Each of the substances originate in different sources, but what links them is that we breathe them on everyday basis, and they impact us on everyday basis. When it comes to photochemical reaction, when ozone rises, here you can see a very simplified chemical scheme. They are not all reactions that lead to the creation of ozone. Very simply said, the nitrogen dioxide is broken down by sunlight, especially during summer, produces a nitric oxide and a free oxygen atom linked, and which is combined with oxygen molecule to form ozone. This newly formed ozone can react with nitric oxide, regenerating nitrogen dioxide and oxygen. But then we get volatile organic compounds that react. They firstly replace the ozone, they create radicals and peroxy radicals, and they react with nitric oxide, and it, instead to get the ozone out, it stays in the air, and these all produce nitrogen dioxide and organic radicals, and this creates one cycle. And these substances do not need to be of anthropogenic origin, because also some vegetation or some plants are releasing it, and that's why it's also important with any green measures that we select the trees carefully and that we look at the whole thing in a context. Because if we select the types of trees that release higher amount of the substances such as monoterpenes, then we can even worsen the situation. These chemical reactions are not isolated, but we need to look at them in the context because they can have a huge impact on our everyday lives and health. Specifically, I would mention one example that occurred in United Kingdom, where one 9-year-old girl, Ella, lived approximately 25 meters from a very busy road or street, and also she suffered from asthma. She was hospitalized a couple of times, but in 2013 she died. Why am I mentioning this example? It was for the first time in the history of the United Kingdom, the court decided the reason of her death was the exposition to the air pollution. That was the first time in the history of the UK. So she was not killed by any accident or any inborn genetic sickness, but she was killed by the air she breathed every day. So we need to think about what kind of air do we breathe and how does it impact us, because if we look at it from a complex perspective, we can prevent these things happening or these examples happening. And we can also prevent the chemical reactions having such negative consequences on our lives. And here we have an article about her mother that became an activist in this area. And she keeps fighting for minority rights, especially those minorities living in the areas that are overpolluted. When it comes to air pollution, it is seen often in the context of the outdoor air pollution, but by us closing the door, the pollutants don't stop at our doorstep. They get into our schools, into our apartments, and they are also complemented by indoor pollutants through, for example, diffusers or scented candles or cooking or some other substances that are coming from construction and also furniture materials. And if these substances are concentrating in our households, this can lead to consequences that we feel every day, and they can lead also to sick building syndrome. And you also may feel something like that without having any specific diagnosis. For example, you're coughing or your eyes are irritated or you have headaches. This can be also caused by this syndrome. It can also be building-related illness, which is a specific illness coming from specific buildings. So we are no longer talking only about symptoms, but we are talking about specific illnesses such as asthma or allergies and so on. And now that Sandy already talked about the impacts of bad air quality, we should also talk about what to do with it, what kind of measures to take. And before we take any measures, we need to know the data in order to be able to compare, to firstly establish what is a specific area we need to search for solution in, but also we need to monitor if the solutions work. And for this, we can use the calculation of the city carbon footprint, since we already spoke about the greenhouse gas emissions. This is the amount of greenhouse gas emissions of one city for 1 year. It's given in tons, and it's being calculated every year, so you can control it on an ongoing basis and to monitor it. The overall calculation is based on this methodology, which is called Global Protocol for Community Scale Greenhouse Gas Inventories. This methodology divides this calculation into two categories. We have scope 1, 2, and 3. Scope 1 focuses on direct emissions that are created within the bounds of the city, and here belong the transportation, stationary sources, waste, direct emissions, for example, from production activities. Scope 2 is focused on indirect emissions based on grid-supplied energy. It can be cold, it can be heat and steam. And Scope 3 is the most complicated. Whoever calculates carbon footprint know that this is one of the most complicated calculations. These are emissions originating out of bounds of the city, but they are usually created, in relation with the city. So, for example, we have a city producing specific waste, but the waste is processed in an adjacent city, and the emissions are created in the neighboring city. And still, these emissions are calculated for the city that produced the waste. So these are the emissions that are linked directly with greenhouse gases. And if we focused only on the carbon footprint calculation, we would only monitor greenhouse gases, and we would ignore all the polluting substances that Andy spoke about. And in this case, we would just have a carbon tunnel vision, and we would lose the perspective on the substances that have direct impact on our health. That's why we also need to monitor these substances and measure the substances. And on this picture, you can see the amount and also the measuring stations for the substances. And if I asked you if you think that this is enough, I believe that the majority would say that not really. The amount or the number of the stations that are in all Slovakia should only be placed in Bratislava. So we still lack these measurement stations, and it's already been visible at the beginning of the year in Bratislava, where when the smell was spreading and nobody could identify what the smell was, and some external laboratory identified the smell, and it was not a problem, but still people were afraid, and we could prevent that if we had enough of the stations measuring the pollutants. And except for calming down the inhabitants, the high quality data also help protect the inhabitant health. The health of inhabitants, because you monitor the substances that have direct negative impact on the health of inhabitants. So, for example, if some substances are getting to the limits of like healthy spread of the substances, you can inform the inhabitants to stay at home. Also, this data help efficiently plan the zonal development. I would again link it to carbon footprint, because this is great in identifying a specific category with the highest amount of emissions. And these measurements are helping to determine specific hotspots. So you can define that the transportation area is producing the highest amount of emissions. So if you know that, then you can, for example, plan for some green areas or something similar. Also, the high-quality data help you prevent legal and reputation problems, because the European Union already limits all the substances, and we need to observe that, not only because of the impact on our health, but if we exceed these limits, it will also be fined. So now we know why to have the data, but we also know how to evaluate them. We need to assess them in the context of the source, geography, seasonality, or behavioral pattern. It's important because we need to identify the source correctly. So for example, if you are at some village, probably the main source will be the incineration or the burning the household. So you will probably have the high values of PM 2.2. In transportation or in the cities, the most emissions will come from transportations, in industrial zones from something else. But it doesn't need to be the fact. For example, in the city, someone burns something, some waste, and again the substance levels rise. The next level of context that we need to focus is the geography. For example, if the city is in a valley or elevated, so then we need to take into account the inversion or the wind. When it comes to seasonality or pattern, behavioral patterns, we expect that in winter, for example, people will be heating their households more, or that people will use fireworks during New Year's Eve, so the outdoor air quality will be worse. So when it comes to the neglecting the air quality, we need to be aware of what are the consequences of such neglect, of neglecting the air quality. So Sandy already talked about what kind of negative consequences there can be, but besides, the healthcare costs are rising. People spend more time on sick leave, which also has another impact on economy, because usually there will be no new investor coming into the place where people are on long-term sick leaves. If I'm to also decide where to live, where to reside, I will go to the city, which is nice and green, and I'm not afraid to breathe. Education of children, we know that some of the substances have direct influence on the cognitive performance, and the absence rate grows with the higher pollution. And the potential of youth goes down, because if they are on sick leave, if they are sick, then their potential is lost. And there are also other consequences in the context of climate resilience. And to sum it up, I would simply say that the cities should be the leaders in monitoring and evaluation of air quality and management of air quality. because of everything that we've mentioned. And we need to remember that polluted air does not kill immediately, but it shortens life, and it can have multiple negative consequences on our health, economy, and also public trust. So it means that we should invest in sensors and monitoring stations and also meaningful measurements. And also we should assess this data efficiently and look at them from a complex perspective, and based on that, introduce measures. When we focus only on carbon footprint and carbon dioxide, it's not the only important manner. We need to also look at other substances and take or evaluate the things in the context, and based on that make the decisions that can lead to health and resilient cities in the future. Because we cannot live in the city where each in-breath means a risk. And this should be the key takeaway of this presentation, because the air pollution is not only an ecological question, but it's also a question of competitiveness, also public trust in the city management. Thank you for your attention. At the presentation of Mr. Masaryk, I said that I would like to go and educate myself more, and the same I would repeat here. I got to know things that are that were very interesting. I got terrified, and I even stopped breathing when I was hearing about everything that can go wrong. And I am now reconstructing my home, and I see the mold in my house. I was really badly surprised that I was breathing it. How much one measuring station or measurement device cost? By the way, it was very nice to hear. Anyway, I just tried to make it funny. Anyway, I was a bit terrified, but I believe that it will be getting better and better. Thank you. Yeah, you can leave one mic with me. Thank you very much, ladies. And Marcel is here. Marcel said, "Hello, I'm presenting in a moment. There should be the two of us, but I will be presenting just myself. Before I introduce you to the speaker, I would like to draw your attention to this slide. You can see that we have QR code for Slido in case you want to ask questions for the final panel today. Last year it was quite fun, so if you have any question, please let us know, and we will open these questions at the panel from the perspective of experts. That would be